There is a day, just one, when the nice guy stops apologizing. It isn't a day of rage. It isn't a day of meltdown. It is silent. He wakes up, looks at the list of people who need him, and beneath it all, he feels something he has never felt before. Nothing. This man didn't become cold overnight. He simply gained clarity. And when that happens, no one around him knows what to do, because the person who always yielded, always fixed things, always absorbed the blow, simply stops. No one warns you when this day is coming. There is no speech, no ultimatum, no slamming doors. One day he simply doesn't reply to a message that months ago he would have answered in seconds. And the world around him cracks, because it discovers, too late, just how much it depended on his silence to keep functioning. Jung had a name for what lies behind this moment. He didn't call it waking up. He called it individuation, and that is what this video is about. If you have ever been called too nice, too sensitive, the one who always fixes everything, perhaps that praise cost you more than you realized. Before we continue, if you have ever felt this weight, of being kind out of obligation, not choice, leave a comment with the word present. It helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this. And subscribe, because every week we dive deep into Jung, the shadow, and the parts of ourselves that society taught us to hide. Jung used a Latin word to describe the social face we construct: persona. It literally means mask, the very same mask Greek actors wore in the theater, crafted with an open mouth shaped like a megaphone so that the character's voice could reach the audience. No one is born a nice guy. We learn to be one. A child learns early on which parts of them are applauded and which are punished. If every time you disagreed, there was a fight, and every time you gave in, there was peace. Your nervous system learned, long before any conscious decision, which behavior guaranteed emotional survival. This represents pure adaptation, not a weakness of character. A child who learns to read their mother's mood before entering the kitchen, or who anticipates their father's irritation before a single word is spoken, is merely acting efficiently. That child is surviving with the tools available to them. The problem, Jung argued, arises when we identify with the persona rather than the simple fact of possessing one. Everyone has one, and needs one. Without a persona, you become incapable of functioning socially, going to work, and negotiating with the world. The real danger lies in forgetting that the mask is merely a tool and beginning to believe that the mask reflects your only face. And that is exactly what happens to the nice guy. He isn't faking it. He truly is kind. The issue is that this kindness has lost the character of a choice and become an automatic reflex. He says yes before asking himself if he actually wants to accept. He smiles before he feels like it. He apologizes before he even knows if he made a mistake. Over time, the line between one's own essence and the expectations of others vanishes, and that is when the trap springs shut. When the mask becomes all that is left, shedding it brings a profound fear of ceasing to exist. Every persona comes with a price. Everything excluded from the image of the good person: anger, desire, the will to refuse, ambition, and the healthy selfishness of taking care of oneself first, remains alive in the unconscious. Jung called this reservoir the shadow, the part of the psyche kept away from the light of consciousness because it was judged unacceptable, dangerous, or too selfish for social life. And here is the point most people ignore. The shadow gains strength precisely when it is dismissed, as it loses our conscious direction. The shadow begins to leak. It manifests as a silent, nameless resentment, an unexplainable medical fatigue, and small, covert punishments, like conveniently forgetting a message, chronic lateness, or a freezing silence right after accepting yet another obligation. The nice guy rarely resorts to shouting. He prefers the slow leak. This explains a dynamic that confuses onlookers. Why someone so calm suddenly has a disproportionate explosion over a dish left in the sink or a silly comment. In isolation, the trigger does not justify the reaction. However, the crisis is never about today's dish. It reflects years of tasks accumulated in silence under forced smiles. The shadow ignores the calendar. It tallies the accumulated pressure. And pressure contained without conscious escape valves always finds a way out, even if through the wrong door and at the most inappropriate moment. There is a psychological mechanism that repeats with structural consistency. An individual learns, from childhood, that being indispensable is the only secure way to guarantee affection. From then on, he shapes his life to serve parents, partners, friends, and bosses. Every time he swallows his feelings to avoid confrontation, he is labeled mature. Every time he cushions someone else's anger to keep the environment stable, he is called a good person. This positive reinforcement feeds a dangerous cycle. Self-effacement begins to be viewed as a virtue. Every compliment for being easygoing or never causing trouble acts as another brick in the barrier separating him from his own will. Jung did not write about nice guys specifically. This term gained popularity decades after his death, but he dedicated a large portion of his work to explaining the exhaustion of those who build their identity entirely around external approval. The person loses touch with their own desires. In a Jungian reading, they begin to live from the outside in, limiting themselves to reacting to the world's expectations instead of acting from internal motivations. In analytical psychology, this dynamic characterizes living through the persona, distancing oneself from the self, the organizing center of the psyche that Jung defined as the actual totality of the individual, beyond social appearances. The cruelest aspect of this silent pact is the absence of direct coercion. The individual simply internalizes through repetition that this is the only safe path. And safety routes, when walked for too long, lose the aspect of choice and begin to simulate personality itself. A curious consequence affects those who spend years managing the emotions of others, the development of an extremely detailed mental mapping of other people's behavior. This individual knows precisely which comment will irritate their mother, which phrase their father will use to dodge responsibility, or when a friend will stage a crisis to become the center of attention. This ability is not born from the formal study of psychology, but from the need to decode every trigger and emotional sequence to survive in that environment. What truly stands out is what is done with this knowledge. Despite clearly seeing the manipulations and weaknesses around him, the nice guy almost never uses this information for his own benefit. He prefers to file it away, absorb the impact, and keep caretaking. This retention exacts a heavy toll. Consciousness transforms into a meticulous inventory of others, while remaining completely empty regarding oneself. Personal needs are buried beneath sacrifice, simply because there was never space or internal permission to investigate them. This tension was recognized by Jung as the core of the self-knowledge process. It becomes impossible to build healthy relationships with the external world while systematically ignoring our own reality. Mapping others' behavior without deciphering one's own creates a distinct imbalance. The individual becomes hyper-perceptive about others and completely blind to themselves. Jung defined projection as the mechanism by which we locate qualities or flaws in others that actually belong to our own psyche, or that we wish to see in them. This is a central pillar of analytical psychology, widely discussed in his studies on therapeutic transference. The nice guy directs this mechanism toward people's potential. He ignores the reality of the other person to focus on who that person could become if they received enough attention, patience, and dedication. He consumes his own energy trying to shape this idealized version, as if personal effort were capable of sculpting the statue he already visualizes in his mind. This effort sustains itself until the moment reality shatters the illusion. The breaking point rarely arises from betrayal or a lie itself. It solidifies when the person realizes that their intuition already knew the truth months or years ago, but was silenced in the name of fantasy. Jung described this collapse as the withdrawal of projection. When the idealized image crumbles, what remains is the real person, stripped of filters, forcing the individual to face the void and decide what to do with the reality that is left. And it is precisely at this point that most people expect to see anger, explosion, revenge. But what Jung described as the next step is the exact opposite of that, and it is the part that almost no one truly understands. Because it isn't about turning cold, it's about becoming whole. And the reason this process is so silent, so difficult to predict from the outside, has to do with a principle Jung retrieved from 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. A fundamental Jungian concept explains the abrupt arrival of this moment: enantiodromia. This term, borrowed from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, was adopted by Jung to demonstrate how any psychological pattern driven to its extreme limit tends to transform into its opposite. The logic is clear. Psychic systems operate in search of balance. By forcing a trait to its absolute limit, whether unrestrained generosity or infinite compliance, the psyche reacts to compensate for the excess. The shift is not born from a rational decision to change one's identity, but from the unsustainability of maintaining an extreme for too long. Whoever spends their life bending over backwards eventually reaches a natural breaking point. Because of this, the transition shocks onlookers, giving the false impression of a sudden change, when in reality, it reflects years of internal pressure accumulated long before the spark. Contrary to appearances, this movement does not mean adopting selfishness or coldness. Jung viewed enantiodromia as a description of a natural mechanism of the mind, not a behavioral recipe. It illustrates the fate of an extreme pattern maintained without awareness, differing significantly from a healthy process of transformation. This boundary separates the individual who merely exploded from the one experiencing a genuine process of individuation. The individuation proposed by Jung requires the integration of both parts, avoiding the mere exchange of forced kindness for defensive coldness. The goal is to strip kindness of its automatic character and transform it into an act of conscious choice. This distinction is crucial because many individuals, upon beginning this shift, confuse setting boundaries with isolation or indifference. Instead of assimilating the shadow, they merely change their wardrobe, abandoning the persona of the nice guy to don the armor of the tough and insensitive one. This posture represents nothing more than a new prison with a different aesthetic. Jung emphasized that integrating the shadow demands considerable moral effort, as it forces the individual to face their own complicity in the dynamics that drained them. It is the moment to recognize the weight of one's own automatic yeses in building that scenario. This step hurts more than anger directed at the other person, because it removes the individual from the role of pure victim and returns to them the responsibility for maintaining the cycle. Though uncomfortable, this honest examination of one's own participation in the problem is what Jung considered the true beginning of psychological maturity. In daily practice, this transformation manifests in quiet actions, and it is precisely the simplicity of these actions that generates the greatest impact within the family dynamic. Within the family core, the nice guy usually plays the role of the universal mediator, the one who absorbs tensions between parents, pacifies siblings, and carries the weight of generational conflicts. Because he has done this for so long, the family begins to view this mediation not as a severe emotional drain, but as a natural obligation of his personality. When this individual decides to step back, refusing to intervene in others' arguments or ceasing to carry the frustrations of relatives, the immediate response is usually bewilderment or accusations of emotional detachment. The hidden truth in these crises is that family stability depended directly on this person's invisible sacrifice. When the shock absorber stops working, the system is forced to face its own unresolved issues without intermediaries, revealing the fractures that were previously camouflaged by the nice guy's dedication. In a professional context, the mechanism takes on a different form. It shapes the employee who accumulates extra tasks without contesting, covers up team errors without demanding proper credit, and smooths over internal friction at the expense of their own well-being. The shift, when it solidifies, rarely takes the form of direct confrontation. It manifests as a clear delineation of scope. The professional maintains the quality and deadlines of their own obligations, but ceases the automatic compensation for the failures and disorganization of the team. The protocollary "it's fine" gives way to realism. Leadership accustomed to this limitless flexibility quickly feels the impact. This perception does not stem from a drop in technical performance. but from the fact that the structure relied on his overload as if it were an inherent part of the job description. The essential distinction remains valid. This is not about negligence or a lack of interest in one's career, but the necessary calibration between the clauses of a contract and the exploitation disguised as goodwill. It is in romantic relationships that this transition usually exacts the highest price from both parties. A partner accustomed to unrestricted forgiveness and an absence of demands is suddenly faced with someone who names discomforts, signals boundaries, and expects real reciprocity. Behaviors that used to pass without comment now hit a wall. Some partnerships find strength in this crisis. The partner understands the previous imbalance and accepts the challenge of adjusting their own posture, participating in a reconstruction based on equality and abandoning unilateral sacrifice. Other bonds, however, dissolve in the face of this change. This outcome occurs not because the transforming individual has become intolerable, but because the relationship structurally depended on inequality to function. Without chronic submission as currency, the union loses its foundation. Jung interpreted these crises as natural developments of individuation. As consciousness expands, bonds based on automatic roles and projections are inevitably tested. Some evolve through the light, others fall apart because of it. A common question arises at this stage of the process. How do we differentiate this transformation from purely selfish behavior? Jung's perspective points out that selfishness and narcissism orbit around ego inflation, a condition in which the subject proclaims themselves the center of the universe, disregards the perspectives of others, and destroys the capacity for genuine exchange. Individuation moves in the opposite direction. It does not seek the expansion of the ego at the expense of others, but the unification of fragments of the psyche that were scattered. The goal is to allow relationships to be born from a foundation of integrity rather than lack. The individuated person preserves their capacity for empathy and generosity, but these actions lose the compulsive character driven by the fear of rejection, gaining the contours of autonomy and sustainability. A practical criterion summarizes the difference. The narcissist ignores the weight of their lack of boundaries and blames the world for their frustrations. On the other hand, someone experiencing individuation feels the discomfort of disappointing others by saying no, but develops the maturity required to endure that tension instead of yielding to the automatic reflex. The nice guy who completes this crossing does not turn into an apathetic person. Feeling remains alive, but detached from obligation. He will continue to offer support, but under the criterion of his own choice. He will continue to love intensely, but under the condition of reciprocity. His kindness will persist, but as the fruit of his own internal solidity, not as a bargain to avoid abandonment. This scenario illustrates the Jungian concept of becoming who you are, the reconciliation between light and shadow under the conscious guidance of the self. It is worth noting that this journey lacks a definitive finish line. Jung defined individuation as a lifelong process, not a static destination. There is no moment when an individual becomes completely immune to old habits. Progress lies in constant vigilance to notice the return of the old persona and consciously choosing to act from a more whole place. Perhaps you recognize this dynamic in your own story or in the life of someone close to you. Whatever the case, Jung's core teaching does not preach the absence of affection or care, but the end of concessions made out of mere reflex, opening up space for conscious choices. If this content made sense to you, share in the comments. At what moment did the need to stop erasing yourself become clear? And if you want to dive deeper into the concepts of the shadow, the persona, and individuation, watch the next video indicated on the screen. I am sure you will learn something interesting there as well. Thank you very much for your attention. See you in the next video.